You grew up a Harshman.
I grew up a Harshmanite. Being a Harshmanite meant we didn't swear, we didn't drink, we didn't smoke, we turned the extra cheek, we didn't serve any other god but our God, so we didn't serve the military and whatnot. And we were good and righteous, but most important, we were the only ones to go to heaven. All the rest of the world was lost to sin, degradation, and the devil. We had two examples of what happened if you lost the edge on your faith. One was Herschel. Herschel was a grandson of SR, I think. Herschel had a chemical problem in his brain. Herschel was brilliant and crazy. He spent most of his life in an institution. And once in a while, they would dope him up with something or other and bring him to church. And he would get up in church to testify. Yeah, it was one of those churches where you witness, you testify, you get up and you tell your story. And Herschel would get up and get going and going and going. And part of it makes sense and part of it makes no sense whatsoever. And everybody is very uncomfortable. And finally somebody would get Herschel back down in his seat again. And we'd all breathe a little easier. Herschel is an example of what happens if you don't live right. The other example is Luke Parker. Luke Parker, interesting guy. I worked with him for some period of time. Luke was a person who was both gifted and on the far edge. So Luke was a little bit crazy and he was a little bit wonderful all at the same time. But Luke, from time to time, he needed to be in the institution also. So he was the second example of what happens if you're not a good Harshmanite. So we were the chosen, we were the people, we were the ones to keep pure and upright and have no bad thoughts and beat yourself over the back for any time you thought about a girl or whatever. I accepted all of that when I grew up, all the way into roughly my 17th, 18th year or so. And I began to ask questions around the dining room table at night about why do we Harshmanites believe in this? Why do we Harshmanites believe in that? I can't explain why my brothers and sisters didn't have the same kind of questions that I had at that time, but we did with my parents and discussed those things at some length around the dining room table after the meal was over, and it was never totally satisfying to my mind in the answers that I got. I worked at that time at the candy factory, and my job was, you can believe this, lift 44 tons of candy per day onto an endless belt that went down for packaging. And a lot of the time I was in this room by myself. Lift it up, dump the trays, lift it up, dump the trays, lift it up, dump the trays. So your mind has a lot of time to work over things because it's not doing anything else. And there were older women who worked there at that time, who'd grown up there. And I said to them, why do we believe this? And they said, well, you know, they tried to woof it through as best they could, but they didn't really understand. So it wasn't very satisfying. But those same women on Saturday would go over and clean Aunt Leah's house stem to stern. It's one of their duties. And when they were over there, they also had learned to pass on the news about what's going on in the community. I didn't know at first that I became news. Francis is asking about their interpretation of my question with their inflection and whatnot, which was a little bit disturbing in their translation of that to Aunt Leah. If she had just said, well, have him come over, let him talk to me. She didn't. Instead, she snuck a paragraph or two into her sermon that was directly related to what I had asked about. And it was recognizable. And then it was more than 2 paragraphs, it was a page. And then it was a sermon. Get your house in order, young men. Not by name, but by the and I thought, gee,
And how old were you as you were?
I was now 19 years old.
And you had been promised that you had been being given a farm eventually that the church.
Oh yes, the church had a farm, and I had taken care of that farm for some time. Loved it, appreciated it a whole lot.
And you were looking forward to being the farmer.
The farmer for the church.
Yep.
And I was outmaneuvered. One of the guys came to her and said, he's doing a terrible job out there. I'm older. I understand what needs to be done. And what we need to do is get him off of there and do it right. So she said, okay, tell him he's off of there. So he called me over to his chicken coop. Goddamn chicken coop with 300 chickens in there. Walking down, where are you, Paul? Where are you, Paul? Oh! Aunt Leah says, you're off the farm. You're done. You're out. What do you mean? She said, you're done. You're out. I'm taking over. And he did. She continued to address me in sermons, and I continued to have a rougher and rougher time reconciling who I was, who she was, what we're supposed to believe in. And the idea was that all the rest of the world is evil. Only here. I couldn't really accept that. I went to work on a Monday at the candy factory, and I thought about being shunned now all day long. Shunned. Nobody would talk to me any longer because I was poison. They all knew I was poison. And so I said to myself, this is not a way to live. As bad as Luke Parker and Herschel is, I need to go and find out about the rest of the world. I came home after work on Monday with my mind made up to pack my suitcase, one of those strange old suitcases from the past when Samsonite first invented this strong stuff, and had been given to me for an 8th grade graduation present. I packed that suitcase. I think Leon was the first one in. He said, what are you doing? I said, I am leaving here. And he said, where are you going? First bus out of town, wherever. He said, you got enough money? I said, no. He said, here's some more. He gave me some money. And he went and got my dad and said, Francis is thinking about leaving here tonight. And my dad said, well, tell him to come over here and talk to me. So I went over there to my dad and he said, these things blow over. Give it some time. It'll blow over. I said, Daddy, I'm not content with that. I've got to find out what else is there. So I'll let you know. Leon gave me a ride up to the bus station. Greyhound bus station in Sullivan, Illinois. About 5 or 6 in the afternoon.